Chapter 27. Monday afternoon, Barney left the office to deliver a deposition in a civil case. I was staring at my hill and thinking about the murder when Mitch walked in. It seemed like we avoided each other since Kevin died. Mitch is head paramedic at Terlingua Fire and EMS, and so like Kevin in some ways, the opposite of him in others. He has black hair and blue eyes, and Kevin has blonde with hazel eyes. Kevin was tall and slender, while Mitch is shorter and stockier. They were rodeo buddies and served in each other's teams. Kevin was better at bronc and bull riding. Mitch is a champion roper. I didn't know if Mitch was still in rodeo after what happened. We rarely spoke, and never about rodeo, bulls, roping, or even cowboys. Mitch approached me warily. "Are you busy?" I stood, hugged him, and sat at my desk so he could sit in the overstuffed chair. "I'm glad to see you, Mitch." "Really? Of course. I was afraid seeing me would make you sad." "I'm doing better." "Listen," he said, "I saw Austin. I had an ambulance run and saw him at a convenience store. He told me what you said about your last conversation with Kevin." Mitch sighed and looked around as if for an escape. "I've been meaning to talk to you, Rita, but it's so hard." "I know." "I wanted to tell you that when Kevin hung up the phone, he laughed and said, 'That woman's crazy about me.' I agreed that you were. He said, 'Let's go do this thing, Mitch. All I can think about is the makeup sex.' He knew you loved him, Margarita, and I can't believe you question that." "I do know it, but I wish I could take back what I said. I would never have let those be my last words to him." "He knew that." "He said something else right before his ride." "What was that?" "He said, 'Margarita thinks I'm crazy to ride bulls, but they're nothing compared to her. They don't scare me nearly as much.' The things he said about you made me jealous. I wanted to have a woman I thought half as much of as he thought of you." "Oh, thank you, Mitch. I hope this puts your mind at rest." "Well, there's still one thing I want to know." "What's that?" "I need to know about the accident, the details of it. I think what I imagine is worse. Anyway, maybe I can quit wondering if you'll tell me the truth." "I don't want to." "I know, but please tell me. I can take it, Mitch. I have to know the details." "Margarita, it happened in seconds." "Did the bull's hoof go through Kevin's chest?" "No, but it crushed him." He let out a long sigh and seemed to be thinking it over. "Look, I'll try to tell you." He struggled to compose himself. "Kevin drew the meanest bull there," he finally said, "but he was undaunted." "Well, you know how he was." I nodded. "He had a great ride, even went past 8 seconds. But when he started to jump off, I saw him jerk his boot and I realized he was caught in the strap. His attention was on that and then instead of the bull, and it tossed him off. It went wild, kicking and bucking, and it dragged him for a few seconds trying to get away. Kevin fought to free himself because he knew it could kill him. I saw the panic in his face. I ran forward to help, and your dad was beside me, but as we got there, the bull's hind leg came down on Kevin's chest. Then it broke free and ran off." Big tears ran down Mitch's cheeks. He grabbed a tissue from the desk, wiped his face, then handed me one. "He was unconscious, Margarita. We bent over him, and your dad kneeled down and took his hand. His eyes opened, and he saw your father. He said, 'Margarita,' with so much love. I can hear him say it. I know he was trying to tell your dad to tell you he loved you." I wiped my eyes and blew my nose. "Do you think he was in a lot of pain? And please tell me the truth." "If he was, it was for seconds. I think he'd gone into shock and wasn't feeling anything. As a paramedic, I know that's true. I swear it. The life had been crushed out of him. He was bleeding from his nose, his mouth, his ears, and of course his chest. His eyes opened and he spoke a last word, but those were final physical acts. After that, he was gone." "Thank you, Mitch." I came around the desk and we gave each other a long hug. In dealing with my own grief, I'd barely considered his loss or my father's. Mitch went out and pulled the door shut. I had a good hard cry, but I thought the gruesome dreams would stop haunting me. I might have cried longer, but something so terrible happened it took my mind away from my grief and even the murder. The phone began to ring, and when I answered it, the sheriff said, "Deputy Ricos, you should come to Alpine right now. Austin Williams is missing." "What do you mean, missing?" "His mother can't find him. He went to feed the horses this morning and said he'd only be gone about 2 hours. He didn't come back, and when he didn't show up for lunch, her worry escalated into real fear. "Oh no," I said, thinking of his ailing heart. "I sent a couple of deputies to the stables, and so far they've seen no sign of him. I thought you might want to come have a look, or maybe you know where he is." "I don't have any idea where he'd be." His mom says sometimes he goes off by himself to think, but she's convinced he would be back by now if that were the case. I agree, he'd have contacted her. He knows she worries and he's considerate of her feelings. Not to mention he wouldn't miss lunch without telling her. That's what she said. She also said he likes to go to the city park by the high school, and she drove over, but he wasn't there. She's becoming distraught, and I thought it might help if you came up here. I'll be there as soon as I can. Should I come to your office first? No, you should speak to Mrs. Williams first, but stay in touch with me. I'll leave here in a few minutes. I stripped out of my uniform and pulled on shorts and a shirt I kept at the office. If I was going to search for Austin, I didn't need restrictive clothing. I put the uniform in my Explorer in case I needed it, along with my Beretta and a small pistol I wore in an ankle holster. Now if I just had a mask and a cape. After I was roaring north towards Alpine, I called Barney. He thought I needed his help, but I assured him I'd call when I knew something. Once I was off the phone, I easily speed up to somewhere around the Explorer's maximum limit and flipped on the lights. I had noticed Austin on campus before I ever met him. One day I went to the university stables to ride because I needed to get away for a couple of hours. Besides, there was a chance that I might run into that long-legged rodeo cowboy, Kevin Madison. Instead, I met another blonde, Austin, who was there feeding the horses and singing. At first, I thought it was the radio, but there was no music, just a clear, strong voice. He was singing San Antonio Rose, and I'd never heard it sung so beautifully. I walked over and saw that there was no radio, only a short, stocky man with Down syndrome who sang like an angel. When he saw me watching, he blushed but kept singing. He smiled an engaging, heartfelt smile. I smiled back, and our friendship began. When he'd finished singing, I clapped and told him how incredible his voice was. He blushed a deeper red and said, "Gosh," several times. He asked if I was going to ride, and then said he'd seen me at the student center and in the library. He was shy, testing the waters to see if I'd keep talking to him. I saddled a huge mare named Maybelle that I'd ridden before, and he came to help. He commented that he would love to ride, but didn't know how. I invited him to go with me and explained I wasn't going far, just needed to get my head away from studies for a while. He seemed astounded to be invited and said, "Gosh," about a dozen times before I convinced him it would be okay. He punched out at the time clock, and I helped him get on behind me. At first he held on to me in a grip of terror, but as we rode away from the stables, he began to relax. He didn't talk non-stop as I feared he might. After he laughed and said he thought being on the horse was great, not so scary after all, he got quiet. He seemed sensitive to the fact that I wanted some quiet time. When we stopped to rest near a jumble of boulders, he didn't speak until I asked him about his studies. He said he liked college but was having a hard time with biology. Biology? I couldn't believe he was taking something so hard. He said he loved learning new things but had trouble remembering important stuff. Didn't we all? I graduated from the law enforcement academy first in my class, and I owe that to Austin. I saw how he struggled and refused to give up. He spent hours in the library studying, and I began to join him. I felt guilty that he put so much effort into everything he did when I was so lazy and wasted my talents. Austin wanted to learn and worked so hard at it that I was shamed into being the best I could be. Every single day he meets challenge after challenge in college and in his personal life, but he continues believing in himself. He has a positive attitude and a sense of humor that carries him through hard times. I was in awe of him then and still. Nearly everything Austin does is a challenge, except singing. Once we were talking about how hard it is to be different, and he said, "I know other people are smarter, but I wouldn't trade. If I had to choose between being smart and singing, I would sing." I couldn't bear the thought of Austin hurt and alone. I wondered if his heart had failed him or if he dropped wherever he was at the time. But where would he be? My radio crackled. "Base to Unit 6, the sheriff said. "Unit 6, come in." Nothing yet. 10-4, Sheriff. I sped up a little more, terrified at being late. When I was about 10 miles from Alpine, I called Austin's mother. She hadn't heard from him and was frantic. She encouraged me to look for him, not waste time coming by her house. She said she had called his friends and none of them had seen him. She added that she'd been to or called all the stores in Alpine and had driven to the park several times and to the public library. The sheriff had the college searching for him on campus, but so far nothing had turned up. My cell phone rang, and when I answered, Barney said, "If I know you, Ricos, you're going over 100 miles per hour and your lights on and your XM blaring." I laughed. "I guess you know me pretty well. You probably have the whole problem figured out already since you're such an overachiever superhero type." "I haven't figured it out anything, and I'm worried sick." "Any word?" "Not yet. The sheriff and Austin's mom haven't left much for me to cover." "Do you have a plan?" "Not much of one. I'm gonna go find that cowboy and make him sweat." "You think Gil's behind this?" "That would be my guess. If he's hurt him, Barney, I don't know what I'll do. I've been thinking violent thoughts." "Stay cool, Ricos. Make the law work for you." "The law's too slow to suit me." "You'll do the right thing," he said. "Call me when you know something, okay?" I parked the Explorer on a side street near Gil's house and put my small pistol into the pocket of my cargo shorts. From there, I walked to his house, trying to calm myself. I didn't know why I felt the need to hide my professional identity, but I didn't want him to know yet that I was a deputy. How that would be to my advantage, I wasn't sure. Gil lived in a small white frame house not far from campus. There were several pickups in the driveway and on the street. Great. I was just in time for a cowboy meeting. My hand went to and rested against the pistol in my pocket for courage. Someone yelled, "Come in," when I knocked. There were 4 or 5 cowboy types drinking beer and hanging out. I didn't see Gil at first, but he saw me and stood up from a ragged recliner where he was sitting. "Everybody out, he yelled. "Now!" They gave him looks, but within seconds they were gone. Gil came up way too close to me. "Did you come back to take me up on my offer?" he said softly. He was looking me over in a way I didn't like. "No, I'm here about my friend Austin." "What's the deal with him, sweetheart? I'm twice as good looking and a lot smarter." "And so humble," I said with a smile I could barely believe I was able to produce. He spit a stream of dark brown chewing tobacco into a plastic cup. "Would you like a beer?" "No thanks, I'm looking for Austin because he's been missing since this morning." "What makes you think I have him? I don't swing that way, and especially not with retards." "That's exactly why I'm here. I suspect you because of your intolerance of him." "Suspect me how?" He moved his face so close to mine I could smell the nasty combination of tobacco and beer on his breath. "That you've done something to him." "I don't have time to fool around with him," he said. He stepped away from me but was staring at my legs. "I got better sense than that." "Really? Why would I hurt him?" He made a pouty face. "Don't frown so, little darling. I could kiss you and make it better. Just one little warm-up kiss." "I'd rather take my little pistol out and shoot myself in the mouth with it." I began moving away from him. "You'd better not be lying to me about Austin," I said between clenched teeth. "Or what, sweetness? You gonna work me over with those sexy legs of yours? Maybe you could wrap them around my neck?" I wanted to wrap something around his neck and twist his head off. "I don't know," I said, "but I promise you'll regret it," and headed towards the door. He laughed loudly. "You don't know whether to kick my ass or kiss it." I turned. My hand was already on the knob. "I guarantee I'll never kiss it." I stepped onto the stoop, caught my breath, and began walking back to my vehicle. "So, super deputy, a lot that proved. Now what?" A nagging feeling dragged me towards the stables. I knew the sheriff already sent deputies, but they didn't care about Austin like I did. Most likely they thought he was a retard that had wandered off and would turn up again. A second look couldn't hurt, and I didn't know what else to do. I parked the Explorer, got out my evidence-gathering kit, and began walking and looking for anything that looked wrong or out of place. I refused to acknowledge that I was going into a rodeo arena alone. First, I perused the times cards and saw that Austin's was punched in at 8:30 and had never been punched out. So that was wrong. He was meticulous about his time card. If he hadn't punched out, then he hadn't left, unless it was an emergency or he was taken away by someone. That was a frightening thought. Next, I looked around the arena and then the stalls. There was only one bull who stared at me with doleful eyes. I felt more sorry for him than horrified by him. My eyes swept the stall quickly and saw nothing out of order. Many of the others were empty except for a few with horses. At first I didn't see the blood. It looked like part of the fresh manure, which was everywhere. One pile of manure looks pretty much like another. I'd been looking until I thought I would throw up from the smell. I saw a piece of golden straw sticking out of the pile, and the end was reddish brown, like blood. I put on my gloves and touched it. Looked like blood, but I couldn't be sure. Smelled like manure. It could be animal blood, or it could be Austin's. My instinct screamed that it was Austin's. I nosed around the stall and discovered a broken-off shovel handle that had been shoved under a stack of saddle blankets. There was a small amount of blood on the handle and a faint spray over the blankets. I called the sheriff's office for help, wishing it would be Barney that came. I kept looking around, moving faster. I was shoving back panic while checking the tack room's storage closets in the office. Nothing. I walked around the building, looking for any sign of Austin, until I found an intermittent trail of blood drops that led towards a shed that was usually locked. The lock was gone. That was another thing wrong. The hinges creaked as I forced the door open. Inside was worse than a cave. It took a moment for my eyes to adjust. I stood still, listening, and heard ragged, labored breathing. I forced the door open as wide as it would go, letting in some light. At the back of the shed, Austin was lying on his stomach in a crumpled heap. Austin! With one hand, I dialed 911. With the other, I was feeling for his pulse. Austin, Austin, can you wake up? Please, wake up, Austin. I can't lose you, too. He groaned but didn't move. Austin, can you hear me? It's Margarita. I'm here. No response. It's okay. The ambulance is coming. Just rest. I kept talking to him and eventually sat down beside him and held one of his hands in mine. Help's coming, Austin. After what seemed like an eternity, I heard the sirens and stepped outside to wave them over. An ambulance screeched in along with a sheriff's office truck, which I recognized immediately as Sheriff Ben's. I see you found him, said the sheriff as he jumped down. Is it bad? His brow was furrowed as he watched the medics get a stretcher out of the ambulance. I didn't get a full report. The dispatcher only said that Deputy Ricos had found Austin Williams. He's non-responsive except for occasional groans. I found some evidence, Sheriff. Looks like he was beaten with the handle of a shovel. Blood in one of the stalls got my attention, and then I noticed a handle sticking out of the saddle blankets. There's blood spray on the blankets. Good Lord, said the sheriff, rubbing his forehead. Why would someone do this? What could he have done? He hasn't done anything. It's Gil. I know it is. The sheriff laid a hand on my shoulder. Try to stay calm. He hates him because he's not a macho rodeo cowboy. Gil sees him only as a retard. Austin is easily upset by Gil's meanness, so Gil bullies him. The medics brought Austin into the light to get a better idea of his injuries before transporting him. They set the stretcher down gently and began looking him over. The bruising was hideous. Ugly purplish-black splotches covered his arms and face. There was a large lump oozing blood on the side of his head. Both eyes were swollen shut, and one looked much worse than the other. Fury boiled over inside me. I taped the stall where I found the blood. I said to the sheriff with a shaky voice, "The evidence is in my kit." "I'll take it from here," he said. "Don't worry." Austin groaned. I couldn't tell if he was awake, but I wanted him to be. "Austin," I said, kneeling beside him. "Are you waking up?" There was no response. Did he have serious head injuries? What had all this stress done to his already jeopardized heart? "We're taking you to the hospital," I said. "You're going to be fine." That had to be true. I thought calmly, however insanely, that if he wasn't fine, I was going to kill Gil Young. In the emergency room, Austin was hooked up to a heart monitor that showed his heart to be stable. Still, he was in critical condition, and for the moment, his prognosis was grim. The doctor said it was wait and see. What in God's name are we dealing with, the sheriff wondered. He hates him, but there's nothing about Austin to hate. "I saw your uniform in your vehicle and brought it with me. I want you to get deputied up and go with me to talk to suspects." I wanted to drink. Needed it more than I ever had. Drinking would dull my senses. All this would go away. Sheriff Ben would never take me drinking. I splashed cold water on my face. After I dressed, I studied myself in the mirror. There was a small, haunted thing looking back at me. It looked swallowed up by the professional uniform. I laughed at myself. Super deputy, I whispered. You look like hell.